It is not that one ought not to do just what one pleases. It is simply that one cannot do other than what each of us has to do, has to be. The only way out is to refuse to do what has to be done. But this does not set us free to do something else just because it pleases us. In this matter, we only possess a negative freedom of will, a nullitas. We can quite well turn away from our true destiny, but only to fall a prisoner in the deeper dungeons of our destiny. Theoretic truths not only are disputable, but their whole meaning and force lie in their being disputed. They spring from discussion. They live as long as they are discussed, and they are made exclusively for discussion. But destiny, what from a vital point of view one has to be or has not to be, is not discussed. It is either accepted or rejected. If we accept it, we are genuine. If not, we are the negation, the falsification of ourselves. Destiny does not consist in what we feel we should like to do. Rather, it is recognized in its clear features in the consciousness that we must do what we do not feel like doing. Jose Ortega y Gasset, The Revolt of the Masses, Chapter 11, The Self-Satisfied Age. Hey, what's up, world? So, I've been wanting to do a video about anarchy for quite some time now. And the main reason why I've been wanting to do a video specifically about anarchy is because I've noticed that a lot of shills are out there pushing the idea of anarchy. Now, I'm not saying that everyone who is an anarchist or who thinks that anarchy is the right solution is a shill or is mindless or anything like that. I understand that anarchy might appear like a good idea. It might appear like a possible solution to our current tyrannical governments. But it's not. And there are a couple of reasons why I believe some shills push anarchy. But the main reason why I believe that the club is trying to drive us towards anarchy is because that's actually the next step in the 5 regime process. If you go ahead and check out my video about Plato's 5 regimes, or the necessary tyrant, I discuss in those videos, or in that particular video, the fact that anarchy actually is supposed to occur between democracy and this tyrant. And the reason why anarchy has to occur between democracy and the tyrant, actually anarchy comes out at the end of the democracy, or actually it occurs within the democratic regime. And the reason why it has to occur is because people have to learn to hate freedom. People have to learn to hate liberty before they can demand a tyrant. But let me not get too wrapped up with that in this video. In this video, I'm actually going to simply be looking at an exchange of comments between me and a subscriber of mine. This guy called Farming It Up Gaming. And actually, maybe this isn't even a guy, maybe it's a girl. I don't even fucking know. So anyway, there was an interesting comment exchange between me and the subscriber, and I thought it might be a good idea to share the discussion that I had with the subscriber. You know, it's pretty interesting. It actually reminds me, I have a lot of great one-on-one discussions with people, like in the real world. I'll have a really good one-on-one discussion with somebody, and then at the end of that discussion, I'm like, damn it, I should have recorded that discussion. So in this case, since it was a written out discussion, it was sort of recorded for me. So I thought that was pretty cool because there's some pretty important things said in this discussion that I want to share with you all. So the first comment that this person left reads as follows. I'm still against the idea of any government ruling over me. No matter who is selected, they get power and become corrupt. Government takes away choice in every aspect of life. It's just a cancer. Although I did enjoy hearing your thoughts and concepts, and I always appreciate your videos, my view still stays the same at this point. And I totally respect that, you know, I like comments like this. So I replied to this person's comment with the following. What if we have a government whose power is actually limited? No direct taxes, clearly defined Bill of Rights, clearly stated powers and limitations, and no emergency powers. And actually, you know what? Let me take this back. I wanted to say something about this comment real quick before I move on. A problem that I see with a lot of anarchists, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, is that they refer to government as if all governments are the same, or as if government is a monolith. They see that all of these other governments have done this. Like, they see that every other government, no matter who is selected into power, once they get power, they become corrupt. And this has been the case historically for just about every government. However, just because those governments fail to secure the rights of the people and fail to limit the power of those in power, doesn't mean that government itself is a failure. It just means that those forms of governments are failures. This doesn't mean that we just give up trying to organize societies and toss out government. That is literally throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I had this first reply, talking about if we have a government whose power is actually limited. Now, of course, I have to say this because people fail to realize that our current government doesn't limit the government's power. And that's something that I'm going to be mentioning in this comment thread. Now, I just realized that I don't have the complete comment here. Just a second. Let me go and fetch. You see here, I didn't put the read more. So let me go fetch the correct slide for this. Alrighty. Now I have the updated slide. So then my second reply, after I had put this reply out there, I had thought to myself, because I do criticize myself. It's important to be self-critical. So after I put this comment out there, I then put this one. I'm like, oh, well, I guess the problem is that even if you manage to establish a government with less power, the people might be tricked into establishing one with more power eventually. And, this is true. Like, even if we manage to introduce a proper form of government, even if we manage to introduce a government that does limit the power of the government, the club can just fake some event. They can use, their virtually unlimited resources to have some staged event that will make people think that they need a more powerful government. And this is actually what happened at the beginning of this nation's history. I'm sure a lot of people remember when they were learning about the Constitution that the reason the Constitution was drafted was because people believed that the previous government, the Articles of Confederation, wasn't strong enough. However, there's a couple of very interesting anti-federalist papers that argue two things. One thing that they argued is that the points that were made, or the reasons that were given for why we needed a stronger federal government, were exaggerated. I think one of them was the debt that was accumulated during the Revolutionary War. They claimed that this debt needed to be paid off and that they needed a stronger federal government to organize the states, or to organize the manner that this debt would be paid off. However, several anti-federalists argued that that debt was being exaggerated and that much of it was already paid off from the selling of certain lands. There were some lands that didn't belong to any of the states that the states were left with after the war, and when they sold those lands to France, apparently it paid off a good amount of this supposed debt. So there were some anti-federalists that had made that point. And another point that several anti-federalists had made was that the reasons that were listed could be solved through other means. They argued that we didn't need this brand new government to solve those problems. And actually, that's why these representatives were together. That's why this supposed we the people were together when they drafted the Constitution. They weren't supposed to draft an entirely new constitution for an entirely new government. They were supposed to be improving upon the one that already existed, or to figure out a way or to come to a compromise for these problems that the different states were having. There were several different problems that the different states were having, and these representatives were elected to deal with those problems. they weren't elected to come up with an entirely new constitution. And some anti-federalists, and even I myself, argue that this actually makes the Constitution completely null and void, because those people who drafted it didn't actually have the authority to draft it. It's not a document that can have any authority. And this was an argument made by several anti-federalists. And I find this to be absolutely hilarious, that we can be taught these two contradictive things. We can be taught that the previous government wasn't strong enough, and we needed a stronger government. But then we're also taught that, hey, don't worry about this strong government because it has checks and balances. So the next thing that I said was, however, the same can be said with getting rid of government. The same thing can be said with anarchy. If we get rid of the government, it can still be brought back eventually. You know, the club can still do this whole staging event which makes people think that they do need a government. So my question to them is then, why not work on creating a better version of government? Why, have this delusion that we can just get rid of government? And this is something that anarchists have, is they're like, yeah, we'll just get rid of government, we'll have anarchy, and then it'll stay like that forever? Like, in your mind, do you think it's going to stay a state of anarchy forever? No, it won't. The universe is in flux. Everything is constantly changing. You know, this is the nature of the universe, and that's why it's important for us to try to be vigilant, creating a balance in this chaotic system. So now this subscriber has a very good reply. They're like, it's an interesting thought. However, I have yet to find a person in my life that has not in some way tried to manipulate or abuse their power. I believe it is taught and exercised at an early age because of the government. This sort of mechanism is a combination of survival of the fittest, higher achievements, and try to rule others instead of being ruled by others type of indoctrination. Knowing that, why would I want an institution or form class that gives them that power? Which again, I have yet to find one person that hasn't tried to take advantage of this power in some way, myself included. And now the youngest generation of people are being dumbed down hard, and in many cases confused, not knowing right from wrong. It's total decay. So yeah, the thing that I don't end up addressing in my replies to this person is this assertion that this abusing the power is the product of the current government. So this person, Farming It Up Gaming, tries to say that, you know, these people who abuse the power or manipulate their power, they're doing this because of, you know, this indoctrination system that we go through. We go through this system of, like, you know, we're going to give the first place prize to the highest achiever, and, you know, survival of the fittest. We have this dog-eat-dog system, and this, you know, I'd rather be the ruler of hell than the servant of hell kind of mentality. Anyway, let's just look at my next comment, and maybe if somebody wants to discuss this point with me in the comment section, I'll explain in the comment section why I don't believe that this is a product of our current system. Like, why power doesn't corrupt because of our indoctrination system, but power corrupts more because of our nature and our mortality and the fact that, you know, we don't know everything. So now, this is my reply to this person. Is it actually? Yeah, it is. Okay. So I say to them, in my previous video, I discussed how this deception and chaos is part of the club's transition from democracy to tyranny. People are being taught to hate freedom and what they erroneously think is liberal philosophy. You know, this chaos I'm talking about is what this person says at the bottom here. That, you know, the younger generation, they're being, like, incredibly dumbed down and confused, and they don't know right from wrong. And not only is this part of the mainstream indoctrination system, but this is also what the shills are involved in doing, or at least the shills are involved in achieving this level of confusion and no one not knowing what's going on. You see, the shills, they put out a lot of nonsensical information. They put out a lot of false information, information that is very easy to disprove, things like flat earth and things like other topics that I've covered. Like now you have people saying that, oh, radiation doesn't exist. You have other people who are saying that viruses don't exist. And all of this nonsensical information is to muddy the waters of truth to such an extent that anybody who's trying to look for the truth will immediately end up giving up. They'll either end up giving up, and if they don't end up giving up, they'll end up following one of these fake truths down some rabbit hole that they can never come out of. And they basically become useless. Because now anytime that they go out and try to affect change, they bring up these obviously ridiculous points, and the general public, the people who are on the fence, are just going to look at them like they're crazy. And rightfully so. So this whole confusion thing, it's all part of their plan, and the shills play a huge part in this. And that's why I have such a problem with shills. Because, I mean, deception is evil. You know, it's one thing when you're being deceived by, like, the mainstream media and by the government and by people who you expect to be deceived by. But it's a whole nother thing when you're being deceived by people who are claiming that they're trying to go after the deception. You know, that's like deception squared. In my opinion, these people are way more evil than the mainstream deceivers. So then I start addressing what the person said about the abuse of power. So the tendency to abuse power is exactly why we need to create a constitution that truly limits the government's power. And by the way, I know I forgot an apostrophe S here. You know, I type really quick. I'm constantly commenting to people. Sorry, I can't make sure my grammar's perfect. So the first thing that I say about this, because, you know, I make this statement, you know, this is exactly why we need a constitution that truly limits the power of government, or the government's power. So the first reason why is, if people have a tendency to seek and abuse power, they will most definitely abuse the power they are granted in a state with no government. Without a government, everyone actually becomes a lot more powerful, and they will definitely abuse it to the max. And this is something that anarchists don't ever talk about. They say anarchy means without rulers. And really, they have no concept, they have no clue as to what that really means to be without rulers. And I can tell that they have no concept of what that means because they don't even think about the ramifications of that. It's like, okay, if you have no official ruler, if there's no ruler in power, then that means everyone becomes their own ruler. Everyone becomes a ruler in a state of anarchy. And then what ends up happening is, you know, everyone behaves like a tyrant. And you know what's hilarious is, I had this other guy comment on this comment thread, and I wanted to include his comment in this video, but his comment disappeared. I don't know if he deleted his comment, and actually I think his other comment also disappeared, so maybe he did go back and delete his comments. And his comment, one of them at least, it was something along the lines of, we don't need a Bill of Rights, we only need freedom. And everyone, once we have freedom, everyone will understand and appreciate freedom. And it's like, he has no idea. That's like, you know, have you been out in the real world? Have you, like, talked to people? People have very different stances and very different beliefs as to what is right and wrong. You know, you need a Bill of Rights because although I believe I have a certain right, doesn't mean that everyone believes that I have that right. And I discussed that later in this comment thread. So let me just go to the next thing that I say here. And the next thing I say is, in my previous video, and this is actually something that I discussed here, I just discussed the fact that the current constitution doesn't limit the power of the government. You know, if we create a constitution that actually limits the power of government, we won't have to worry about people abusing its power because it'll have virtually none. You know, this is the point that I'm trying to set up. We need a new constitution. Now, the Farming It Up Gaming then replies, I agree some form of government always seems to weasel its way back into society, so why not just work on a better one? But what is one good institution or organization or service that the government provides in your eyes? And this, I think that this is a brilliant reply. So, that's actually what brings me to the main point of this video, which is discussing the services that government provides. You know, these anarchists, they're like, oh no, we don't need government. We get rid of all the rulers. And it's like, but wait a second, the government provides some very necessary services that anarchists seem to just totally ignore or anarchists believe that they can just privatize. Like, oh yeah, just privatize it, pay somebody money to do those things. It's like, wait a second, you do realize that they'll have to then profit off of those services, and you do realize that some of these services are super essential. So these private companies, they can charge pretty much any price that they want and be able to get away with it, because their work is essential. Here are the services that I presented. I came up with them like literally off the top of my head, and they're actually not even in the right order. Like number 3 should definitely be number 5. So here are the 5 necessary services that the government supplies, or that the government provides us with. So the first is a neutral third party in criminal matters, or a court and criminal justice system. Believe it or not, even after you end government, you will still have crime. You will still have people violating the rights of others. You will still have people murdering other people. You will still have raping other people. Actually, you'll probably have this in much higher amounts. I know you don't think this will happen. I know that anarchists think that once anarchy happens, everyone will just put their hands together and start singing Kumbaya, but that won't happen. You will still have crimes. So I'll use an example, right? So let's say I live in a relatively remote area. Let's say like my 2 closest neighbors are like a mile away from each other and are a mile away from me. And let's say one day I invite my neighbor over, and then it actually is a trap and I end up killing him. But I claim self-defense. I say, oh yeah, we had this argument, and then one thing led to another, and he attacked me. And look at the cuts on my face. Of course, I'll punch myself in the face a couple of times, or I'll hurt myself to make it look like he attacked me. And I'm like, look, I was defending myself, but I really wasn't. I actually murdered him. You need people to, 1, investigate this, and then after the investigation is over, you need to have a trial over this. You can't privatize those things. You know, the people who are doing it, the private companies that are doing it, I could be in bed with them. I mean, and who's going to pay them? Are they going to pay themselves to investigate? Like, what if nobody around even cares to pay them? What if like the person who I kill doesn't really have anybody that cares to them enough to pay for an investigation? I mean, these are serious problems. And this is just a small problem. I mean, there are other people who have other issues. I mean, in other countries, you have issues over land. You know, I mean, yeah, sure. Let's say if in your anarchy utopia, you ban the owning of property. But let's say if somebody's like using an area and they don't want somebody else to use that area, and they go and they fight each other over that. Who's going to be setting that in order? Or just other people are going to come and want to get involved with that problem? That's not going to happen. I mean, strangers get attacked on the street all the time, right in front of other people, and those people don't even do something when they can do something. You think that they're going to go out of their way and say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to tell those people that they're using the land incorrectly. It's like, wait a second, who are you to tell them that they're using the land incorrectly? And what are you going to do if they're properly equipped? Like, like, let's say a foreign power, and this comes up with my next point, which is organized military for defensive reasons. Let's say you have an anarchy, and some foreign power, some other country or some other government is like, hey, look, they just got rid of their government. They just got rid of their generals, basically. They got rid of those people who will organize them. Let's go in there, and let's fuck things up, and let's take advantage of them not having any leadership. And that's exactly what will happen. And this is exactly why you need a government to organize the military or to organize a defensive strategy. Believe it or not, this is necessary. And you can't do this. This is, as I say here, it's impossible to do this without some form of government or without some sort of ruler. You can't have a military made up of generals, nor can you have one made up of only soldiers. Now, the third thing, of course, as I said, this third thing should probably be the fifth thing. So the third thing is you need a government to collect and distribute funds necessary to fund 1 and 2, and of course, the rest of them, as well as funding other projects that are beneficial to everyone and no one individual really has the means to do on their own. Like, no individual can put together a freeway system or an airport system or a sewage system like the ones that we have. And you know what's interesting? This is actually something that Jose Ortega y Gasset talks a lot about. He talks about how the masses believe that the world that they're in is the product of nature. Like, they think that it's perfectly natural. Like, it's actually funny, not only do the masses think this, I had a professor who tried telling the class that the skyscrapers in Manhattan are the work of nature. You know, in order to build those skyscrapers, in order to have the sewage system that we have, requires a certain culture. And not only does it require a certain culture, it requires a certain system of organization and requires the leadership of certain select individuals. You know, the masses, though, they think that, oh no, all of this stuff is perfectly natural. They think that, you know, they don't really need to put any effort into maintaining this system. This is an edit to the video. I decided that maybe I should actually just read the quote that I'm talking about, because it makes the point a lot better than I happen to make the point here. So this quote comes from Jose Ortega y Gasset's book, The Revolt of the Masses. And as you can see, it comes from chapter 6, The Dissection of the Mass Man Begins. And it goes as follows. Even today, in spite of some signs which are making a tiny breach in that sturdy faith, even today, there are few men who doubt that motor cars will in 5 years' time be more comfortable and cheaper than today. They believe in this as they believe that the sun will rise in the morning. The metaphor is an exact one. For, in fact, the common man, finding himself in a world so excellent, technically and socially, believes that it has been produced by nature, and never thinks of the personal efforts of highly endowed individuals which the creation of this new world presupposed. Still less will he admit the notion that all these facilities still require the support of certain difficult human virtues, the least failure of which would cause the rapid disappearance of the whole magnificent edifice. These traits together make up the well-known psychology of the spoiled child. But the fact is that this system that we live in, the system that many of us rely on, is dependent on our work, is dependent on a lot of things that people just ignore. And this is actually what is slowly happening in society. People think that, you know, they can spend their lives on vacation, or they think that they can spend their lives being basically self-indulgent hedonists, and everything will be fine. They think, oh no, the world maintains order naturally. And like, I mean, it's insane, and there's a lot that can be said about it. But let me move on to the fourth point. The fourth service that the government provides us with is a service with dealing with the international community. You know, there are true power-hungry tyrants in the world, and we need a government of some sort to represent us when it comes to dealing with these real tyrants politically. And having communication with other countries on a state level can be beneficial if done correctly. And this is true. I mean, sure, Japan managed to isolate themselves from the rest of the world for quite some time. However, Japan at least had a government at that time. If Japan isolated themselves from the rest of the world, and also did away with their government, they would have just been open for invasion. I know people don't really think this. They think that, oh no, if a country comes and invades, people will just spontaneously get together and defend themselves. If there is an invading force, if there are some foreign invaders, assuming that society is just going to get together and help each other out, and not just immediately bend over and bow to these foreign invaders, is naive. It's naive, and it has no basis in reality. Most people, and in case if you don't believe me, go out and engage the public. Most people are spineless, gutless cowards, and you cannot rely on them when the time comes to take action. This is a fact, and this is why we do need some government, we do need some system for not only organizing, maintaining, and disciplining a military or militia, not just for that, but we need a system in place where we can have people communicating the threats that we face. Of course, in a responsible, transparent, and uncorrupt manner. Now, the last point that I put here, not only do we need a criminal justice system, not only do we need a government to supply us with a neutral and unbiased criminal justice system, but we also need a government when it comes to defining what crimes are and what their punishments are, a legislator of sorts. Because believe it or not, some people might not agree with you on what a crime is, just like some people might not agree with you on what a right is. Just look at all the people who think that recording is a crime. If you look at these First Amendment auditing videos, there's a ton of people out there who think that recording is a crime, who think that you don't have a right to record them when they're in public. So you need a government to set that straight, to say, hey, look, no, you have these Bill of Rights. Recording a person in public is not a crime. It is a right. However, there are these crimes, these actual crimes, and their punishments are as follows. But anyway, I think that this video is already plenty long enough, and I think I've ran out of things to say, at least for now. So I'm just going to end the video here. Maybe I'll finish it out with a quote, or maybe I'll finish it out with, a silly meme moment from a movie or something.
Are you or are you not the Black Angel of Death?
Without question.
Don't agree with me, it just pisses me off more.